Hey everybody! Today we are doing something just a little different, so consider this some extra bonus content. This has just kind of been on my mind recently, and I figured it might be time to start sharing some of this knowledge that I have. So, as you guys know, I have worked in long-term care and memory care for a very large chunk of my career. And during that time, I had some very big highs and some very low lows. And if you've ever worked in healthcare, you already know exactly what I mean. So, some of the biggest lessons that I learned did not come from textbooks or classes or training manuals. They came from the people and sometimes from the chaos. I once had such a horrible boss that my coworkers and I actually gave her a nickname. We called her Hurricane Karen. And that was not only because she was absolutely a Karen, but she would blow through the building and just leave all of us in this absolute wake of destruction behind her. If you were having a good day, she would literally seek you out just to make sure that you were not going to have a good day anymore. So, of course, as coworkers, we trauma bonded. And as part of that trauma bonding, I decided to create an early warning system for Hurricane Karen. I had the advantage of being able to see when she walked in the building. And so if she came in looking like she was on the warpath, the call would go out. Caw-caw! Caw-caw! Was I a hero? Maybe. But the best part definitely was that we worked in memory care, so she never really knew who it was that was doing these cacaws and just assumed it was probably one of the residents. But as funny as that is, it really does highlight something important. Healthcare workers survive on teamwork, humor, and connection because the job is hard, emotionally hard. One of the most impactful moments of my career came from something called an Alzheimer's experience training. And it was put on by a hospice agency in our area. So they told us that we would go into a room one by one, and we would be given 3 tasks to complete. And that was really it. And that sounds easy, right? Well, then they started adding some layers. They put on goggles that made it very hard to see. And those were to simulate cataracts. And of course, they put on headphones, which muffled our sound. So that simulated some hearing loss. And then we put inserts inside of my shoes that made it just painful enough to stand, but definitely uncomfortable. And that was to simulate nerve pain or neuralgia. So, of course, I walk into this dimly lit room, and out of a dark corner, a woman suddenly stands up and walks towards me. And that alone was startling. But she gave me 3 instructions, and they were simple instructions. It was something like take the shirt to the closet and put it on the hanger, sort the silverware and put the fork on the left, and fold a towel and hang it up in the bathroom. But while she was talking, the audio in the headphones kicked in. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, mid-sentence, you would hear a door slam, and you would hear muffled yelling down the hallway and a car alarm going off in the distance. And then all of a sudden, somebody shouting behind me. And I could barely understand what she was telling me to do. I did my best, but I only completed 2 out of 3 of the tasks that I was given. And I don't even have cognitive impairment that we know of, at least. Yeah. So, but that experience completely changed the way that I provided care, because suddenly I started thinking maybe I shouldn't walk up to somebody behind them and start talking. Maybe I should approach them from the front instead. Maybe I should slow down a little bit. Maybe I've been rushing people and then getting frustrated when they all of a sudden become agitated. It forces you to adjust what you're doing, and that's how you become a better caregiver. One thing that actually shocked me early on was how many different diseases you see in long-term care and memory care. And none of that was really covered in my CNA or my CMA classes, at least not appropriately. Of course, they did mention Alzheimer's, but there's also Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, frontal lobe dementia, Pick's disease, Parkinson's disease, MS, early onset Alzheimer's, and so many more. And they all present differently. I've had residents who were cognitively sharp, but lived in memory care because their physical needs were so advanced. And I've talked with families who were devastated because the kindest, most loving person they knew suddenly started becoming angry and mean. And that's a really hard part of this to understand, that it is not them. That's the disease. One of the biggest things to understand, especially with Alzheimer's, is what is called the reset. So depending upon progression, a resident may forget a conversation within 5 to sometimes 15 minutes. So when they repeat themselves all day long, to them, they're saying it for the very first time. And once I truly understood that, I stopped trying to pull my residents into my reality, and instead I started meeting them in theirs. If they were waiting for dad to come home, I'm waiting too. If they're convinced that their daughter is coming to lunch, I'm convinced too. And if I know that their daughter actually isn't coming, then right before lunch, we'll have that conversation saying, you know what, she just couldn't make it today, but she did say she would try again for tomorrow. One moment where this really hit home was with a resident whose spouse had passed away unexpectedly. Her children would come up and visit her because they were grieving as well and wanted to see their mom, and every single time they would remind her that he had passed away. And every single time it was like she just lost him all over again. She would cry and cry and cry, and then hours later, out of nowhere, remember, and then start crying again and going through that whole grieving process again. Eventually, the family and our team collaborated and made a collective decision to stop telling her. So when she would ask where he was, we would always say, he's going to be here tomorrow. And eventually the grief stopped repeating and her quality of life improved. And as hard as that felt at first, it was far more humane than breaking her heart over and over and over again. And that realization changed a lot of things for me. Caregiving became less about rules and more about strategy, compassion, and quality of life. So we are going to talk about some creative ways to reach residents, especially when they are refusing care. And I'm also going to get into a little bit of the bigger system issues in long-term care, because this work matters and the people doing it matter. One of the hardest things that caregivers deal with is residents refusing personal care. And yes, residents always have the right to refuse. But when that refusal starts to impact their health, we as a caregiving team have to kind of get creative. I once had a resident who was notorious for refusing showers. Nothing worked. Even family involvement did not work. So instead of trying to push her like we normally had to do, I just decided to back off a little. I had noticed that there was a baseball that was in a display case on her shelf, and I asked her about it. And when I did, her eyes lit up. For the next 10 minutes, she went into a full-blown story about how her son had arranged this whole thing for her birthday, and she got to see the game, meet the team, they signed this ball for her. And as she was talking, I gently suggested, you know what? Your son actually said he might stop by for dinner tonight. I don't know for sure, but let's get in the shower so we can be all ready for him. And I want to hear what he says about it too. So who was your favorite team player? And just kind of kept her going that way. She actually barely even noticed she was in the shower that whole time because we kept the conversation on something she was passionate about. And that's the power of redirection. I had another resident who hardly ever spoke. And when he did speak, it was very, very softly. He spent most of his days in a jerry chair, just kind of quietly observing everybody else. So one day we started singing hymnals, and there was a big group of us. And suddenly his eyes lit up, and he started singing as loud as he possibly could, just smiling ear to ear. And that was actually one of the first times I had ever heard his actual voice other than just a whisper. Music reaches people in places that diseases can't. And that's what caregiving should be about. Not just keeping people alive, clean, dry, fed, but helping them actually enjoy their life, giving them opportunities to dive into their nostalgia, familiar routines, opportunities for them to feel and be seen. Now, let's talk about the uncomfortable part. We train CNAs the exact same way, and then we send them into wildly different environments. Hospital care is absolutely nothing like long-term care or home care. Long-term care is not like hospitals or home care. So each of these fields actually requires a deeper amount of training, a specialized training. And most caregivers are not given this in their CNA course. They are completely unprepared when they go into their first job. And some locations will train you, and that's wonderful, but there are other locations that you just get thrown to the wolves. And unfortunately, oversight in long-term care is another big issue for me. It's only once a year. And of course, that sounds like a lot, but I have seen facilities scramble right beforehand, pass their inspections just barely, and then revert back to what they were doing before immediately after that oversight leaves. And that's not how you protect your residents or your staff. Of course, when it comes to leadership, I've always believed that leadership should get in and help out any way they have to, get their hands dirty, because that's how you earn the respect of your team. And if you're a healthcare worker watching this, please don't name your facility, but ask yourself, is this job that you're working helping you grow or breaking you down slowly? And are you trying to change things, or are you just surviving them? Of course, memory care is hard. It's emotional. It's strategic. But when it's done right, it's meaningful in a way that few jobs are. So thank you for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of content, and let me know if you would like to see more of this in the future. And if you are someone who works in healthcare, especially if you work in memory care, thank you for what you do. You are absolutely essential, and we need more of you out there. So I hope that everyone has a wonderful week, and I will see you guys next time.